re-ask your questions about Christianity and love.
Sure.
All right, so welcome to Saturday morning, or actually this for you guys is Friday evening, Sangha. Um, so I'm really glad to see you all. It's April the what?
The 15th here in the US.
April the 15th, the Ides of April. All right. Corey, you had a couple of questions about Christianity, I think, which was something that we had just gotten started talking about anyway. So what is
the things that I've noticed is that it does seem to be it's like they don't really have a lot of instructions for how to pray or how to worship. Like I've just heard lots of different things, and everybody seems to have their own way. So there's not a lot of so just kind of it's always a little bit confusing to me when I was younger. How do I pray, or what is prayer? And so like I was thinking that what is prayer and what is worship, they have to have some kind of similar effect, or maybe not necessarily similar, but the things with ānāpānasati that really are effective and that are so beneficial is that it brings us into the present moment, and it helps with the critical ego thoughts. And so prayer and worship, I was thinking that they also likely would have something to do with helping with those problems, perhaps in a different way or with a different method, but I just never really heard how they work or what they really are. I was hopefully, yeah. And then the other one was, what is love? And yeah.
Let's take with that one later. Let's go back to the quality of what we would mean by worship and experiencing the glory of God. That in fact the language is different, but the issues for humanity are the same. The problems and situations that you find yourself in, folks found themselves in 1500, in 1300, in 1100, all the way back, even to the time of Jesus, and then back to the time of the Buddha. Humanity.
Hello.
Hello, Kishan. Your microphone is really noisy.
Really?
I think your neighbor has like a jackhammer going, dude.
A big humming sound, like it's not plugged in. There, I don't hear it anymore.
I muted it. How about now?
Now it's good.
Perfect.
So,
what's going on? We're in the middle of something.
We're talking about the human condition and religions, and that religions, let us say natural religions, or how things get started, is because basically everybody can see that the human condition needs improvement. That in fact, many people even get the idea that life sucks and that some heavenly world is going to somehow be better. Because this one isn't good enough. And so that's part of what's getting started. Now, the next thing that we can talk about from there is the issue that the word meditation and the word prayer have been linked together within Christianity for many, many centuries. And that we could think that there is also other language that we can use to give an indication, like a prayerful attitude. That has a kind of a meaning to it. And yet most modern Christianity, unlike Catholicism basically, they decided to ritualize everything, trying to organize it completely, get it completely ritualized. And then at the time of the Reformation, when the big protest started 100 Years' War because of the publication of the Bible. And then that group, the Protestants, got the idea that, oh, the Catholic Church, just because they had the first Pope and the Rock and Peter and all that kind of stuff, does not make them the authority of religion or of Christianity of the day. That the book does. The Bible, that's the authority, so they think. Or so they started to tell themselves. So much of the practices that were actually to one's advantage in the time before the Reformation was basically thrown out by Protestantism, and then kind of also lost by the Catholics. And that is the whole quality of prayer, and another word that they have is supplication, and that kind of thing. But if you look at it from another perspective, starting back from Buddhism, we can see that basically many of the things that Buddhism teaches, Christianity also wanted to teach. They just somehow got lost in the process and the rituals and the other things. Okay. So, generosity, for instance, is one of the top items on Buddha's list. That generosity is what helps Sangha together. It helps cement friendship, especially if you're generous with yourself in the sense of nurturing rather than being critical. Okay, so generosity in Buddhism can then be seen in Christianity from the perspective of, I think it's even in Paul, where it says that faith, hope, and charity are the foundation, but of these, charity is the lead. That's the big one. That in fact, if you have faith and have hope, but you have no charity, then your faith and your hope is of no value. And so, from the actual practices of charity, we can go then back to the issue of the relationship between prayer and Christian meditation, because what prayer has, let us say, dwindled into is greed, a voice of greed. Now, what do I mean by that? Is that prayer is often asking God for something that we want. Oh, Aunt Susie's in the hospital. We should pray for Aunt Susie. If we pray hard enough for Aunt Susie, she'll get out of the hospital, and then we can blame her getting out of hospital on God. I wonder who we blame the bill on. So there is also the catch-22 that goes with that.
Wouldn't meditation be a even more selfish version of that in most improper applications, where you're sitting there wanting something?
Well, that's the whole point, is that the prayer is actually the voicing of it as the actual right thing to do. To where within what we're talking about within ānāpānasati is just the opposite of that, is to see that we want something bad enough that we're going to pray to God to get it. And that's the problem right there, that we want something bad enough that we're going to pray to God to get it. But then the Christians, they run into it. In fact, I think this is kind of a joke, and that is the issue of God's plan. And George Garland got that one right when he says, God's plan. God has a plan, and you want him to change his plan. Here he has going around with a plan that's lasted for 5, 10, 15,000 years, and you want him to change his plan just because you want something. And so that's a kind of way of looking at that. But there are deeper kinds of prayers rather than that surface one. That in fact, an example of another kind of prayer would be sitting in the presence of God. Well, now we're getting much closer to Buddhism, because sitting in the presence of God means sitting in the presence of this present moment. That we can begin to understand another version without using the Christian version of God, but we can look at it from the issue of the Dhamma, or even the Dhammakai. Now, the Dhammakai actually is what we would call the full body of the Dhamma. That means that the Dhamma keeps spreading out and out, but the Dhamma actually is your location, your environment. Or another way of saying it is the Dhamma is your world. And that the Dhammakai is the sum total of all of the worlds. And so if we are sitting here in the present moment in the Dhamma, then that is actually a kind of Christian prayer. We just use different language for it. Just being in the present moment would be like just being in the presence of God. Except by adding this word God to it, they make it a little bit more magnificent than most people see the present moment. And in that regard, you could say, well, the Christians now have something going for them, because they're trying to take the student out of the position of my environment and my week has been dirty and hard and tough and all of that. How dare I sit now in the pew in church and feel like I'm actually in the presence of God? Okay. The answer is that that's the feeling of being in the presence of God. And that's exactly what we're practicing with ānāpānasati. We just use a different kind of language. But if you're Christian, we can say, okay, we'll do that. We can say that we can talk ourselves into actually being in the presence of God, because we're already in the presence of God. Here it is. But getting in touch with that and experiencing it that to the fullest. So just sitting in ānāpānasati is like being in the presence of God. We're right here in the senses. And if you want to add that additional language to it, to give you that little extra oomph, to realize how magnificent it is to be alive in God's environment. Here we are. We're in paradise. You're in God's paradise. Adam and Eve were in God's paradise. Now, the story is that God threw them out of paradise, but the reality is they didn't leave paradise. They just decided that it wasn't paradise anymore because they didn't like this, that, or the other thing. And so they were not in a prayerful state. They came out of their prayerful state into the state of greed and wanting things. And now we have to back up to that level of prayer of asking for things that you want that you don't have. And so there's that second level of prayer. And that second level of prayer then is the appreciation that you've got all you need. And this is where real worship comes in, and real gratitude for being alive, to thank God, really thank God, or to thank the universe for just being alive, being able to breathe, being able to see what's going on, to actually to worship by appreciation, to be able to appreciate this present moment. But this is kind of Christian language. And because of that, and you know that if the Christians see Buddhism as the enemy, then us Buddhists have got to retaliate with that by seeing Christianity as the enemy. And therefore, we can't use Christian language to talk about Buddhism. But the reality is that we're all humans with the human condition. And that human condition is because we want things that we can't have, we can't appreciate that we're already still in paradise. We're just in paradise with a J1 rather than a galaxy. And so this paradise is a kind of hell. By the way, a J1 is an old version of a Samsung. So this is the whole way of understanding that there is a combination of things, or a relationship between the teachings of the Buddha and correct teachings of Christianity. Because Christianity already has all the good stuff in it. Jesus made sure that it was well expanded. It just, the people didn't understand what he was talking about. It almost requires a Buddhist to understand Christianity correctly. And another way of saying it is your best Christians are Buddhist.
You want to know how I tie the two together? I recognize this as a possible way that they work really well together, is that faith is not knowing something, but it's not quite belief. Faith is, I don't know, but when I realize that I don't know God, right? I don't have knowledge of God. God is unknown,
Sure you
but
do.
I could have faith. Yeah. And so what I took that to mean is that knowledge is kind of like the intellect and the ego and the mind thinking. And so that mind thinking keeps us wrapped up in the mind, and it stops us from feeling and being present. And so what I took those two things to mean, to working together, like how do they work together, is that you have faith so that you could kind of it's a different kind of knowledge. It allows you to drop out of knowledge. And like if you have faith in God or faith in the present moment, you're not having knowledge in the present moment. You're just being present. And like this all kind of relates together to allow you to feel the present moment without knowledge and your mind getting wrapped up and kind of, but I don't know, I was just kind of thinking, and those things stream together and they seem to kind of like work, but how they all work, and obviously that's kind of like takes a lot of practice to know how or what faith feels like. And but I found that kind of doing prayer and doing meditation, they seem to work together. But
Well,
the thing
they're
that
actually the same thing when it's done correctly. We're just talking about a correct practice and putting different names or labels on it. That, in fact, the distinctions come when one goes off in the wrong direction, like asking for something that you don't have is what most people think of as prayer, rather than being in a prayerful state of mind, which is actually a prayerful state of mind is an appreciative state of mind. And not only that, but it's appreciative in the sense that you feel safe. This whole point about feeling safe is a major, major issue. So we should discuss that within the sense of Christianity for a moment. You see, because Christianity has the issue of what they call faith. But faith in Western Christianity tends to become belief, in the sense of having faith to them now means you have to have faith or belief in all of the Christian story, all the magical stories about heavens and hells and fairies and goblins and devils and trinities and all of that kind of stuff, which nobody sees. But what we do have is paradise. That you can see if you know how to look. So if we tend to come out then of our magical stories, we can understand better about what faith actually could be. And I introduced that with Achan Po, who tended to have several little statements that he would make to me, well timed. Get me, he would grab me with just a couple of words. That was the way that he taught. And one of the words that he used was tatata, which was basically be here now. And normally he would say that if he could get close enough to me without me knowing it, that he could literally sneak up so that he could whisper in my ear, hey man, you're not watching because I got close to you and you didn't know it. But also he would say, not sure. And for a long time, I didn't quite understand what he meant by the word not sure. Well, it has qualities to it. One of not sure is the quality of, okay, if you're not sure, then let's keep doing an investigation. Let's keep looking. Let's take on the position that we are not sure. But we can also take on the position that we are not sure, but we're still safe. That not sureness does not have to put us in a state of agitation or worry or fear, because we are not sure. That in fact, what we need to know is just enough so that we can. Now, this is important. We need to know just enough so we can live in paradise, appreciate God's world, be in the here now, and enjoy the heck out of our paradise. Be grateful. Be in great gratitude and supplication in the sense of basking actually in the glory of God, because the glory of God is in the wind, it's in the air, it's in the oxygen that you breathe, it's in the skin, it's in the blood vessels, it's in the water. Water's got some really strange properties to it. And that's all part of the paradise that we live in. And we stay alive that way. And so this whole point about allowing ourselves to feel really, really good, let us say at the top of the way that Christians allow themselves to feel really good when they are in that experience of being in the presence of God. But they talk themselves into it. Why can't we talk ourselves into it, except that we're doing it with a little bit better understanding of what's going on? We don't actually need to have a God in order to be in God's paradise. So from that perspective of God's paradise and practicing that way, this is what we can mean then by prayer and meditation. Now, meditation in the Christian sense had gone off in the direction of contemplation. A contemplation meditation is like contemplating what's the nature of God in Christian language, or what's the Trinity, or what is Mary Magdalene's, or Mother Mary, and the grace or the compassion of Mother Mary. So these are the kind of conceptualizations that they practice, that they call meditation, which are in fact, if you think about it, these are all things that are in the mind, but outside of our reality. They're only concepts. So meditating upon a concept is what's normally practiced within Christianity, to where what we're doing is we're meditating upon that which is real, right here, right now, without having to figure out any of the concepts. So if we think of it from the perspective of the concepts and going back to that position of we don't know or not sure, we can go with just what we need to know to come into that state of supplication, that state of relaxation, that state of generosity and gratitude that is at the hallmark of both religions, except that sometimes Buddhists fail at that because they've gotten too technical in their practice, or Christians fail at it because of the language that they're using, especially in the sense of magical language. But that does not mean that all Christians fail at it, nor do all Buddhists fail at it. But it's really good, and I'm glad that you've asked this question so that we can rise above both of them and look at, in fact, beyond the language, what's really going on. And so going back to that point about not sure, we're only looking for just enough information to bring ourselves out of our ordinary mental state into the state of prayer, into the state of gratitude, in the state of being in the here now, and in communion with the God that we find all around us. That in fact, Jesus taught this also. The kingdom of God is within you, or it's at least around you or among you. That was one of the things that the Christians would argue over at one time, was what did he mean by that word in the Greek? And Jesus didn't even speak Greek. So if Jesus didn't speak Greek, and why are they arguing over what the word Greek in Greek means? Does it mean within or among or around? Within our context, it doesn't even matter that distinction, because the kingdom of God is right here, whether it's here or here or here or here or in. Okay, here it is. This is it. It's all over the place. And so this, by the way, is also the word that we come to understand in English. There was a word that was used, and that word is abba. Well, if you look at the word abba itself, you can see that the derivations of that become the abbot, like of the monastery. Also, words above and about come from this quality of abba, around us. Okay, so when Jesus was talking about Abba, he was talking about the environment that was around him, above him, and about him. And the Christians have translated that word into Father. Well, we can, in fact, allow the word father to be used, but not in the normal sense that we have with a daddy with a penis and sex and procreation and all of that kind of stuff, nor in the sense of a heavenly father like some dude that's way out there. But another way of looking at it is that the environment that you live in is very much like your parents. It sustains you. That we are nourished by our environment, this thing Abba that is around us. And so when Jesus says that I and Abba are one, that really means what he says is that he is in tune with his environment. He is in tune with what we have around us. So this is how we can use the word Abba. Now, that's different than the word Elah or Allah and Elohim. That is a different word, and that's the word that Jesus was using on the cross. My God, how hast thou forsaken me? He used the word Elah or Allah for that one. Robert, you're smiling.
Yeah, there's a great line by the philosopher Slavoj Žižek about that line in the Bible, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Which is that in that line, Jesus is giving Christians permission to be an atheist, because what kind of God would forsake his own son on the cross? So that makes Christianity actually a sophisticated kind of atheism, because of that one line.
That's very interesting. But we could also say that those one-liners like Jesus came out with was because of how he was feeling in that moment. And you can imagine how he did feel. All you have to do is imagine for yourself after a few hours of being beaten, carrying heavy equipment, crown of thorns strapped up or nailed up to the cross, and now you're laying there or standing there, and it's hard to breathe.
Sure, but it's also a response to the question of evil in the world, right? And when something evil is done to someone, they feel the environment is not sustaining them. They're not being nourished by their environment. They're not being taken care of by their environment. And then they would say, what kind of an environment is this? What kind of a God is this?
I love it when you're a half a step ahead of me. That's exactly, you're beating me to the punch. Exactly, that we feel like that we're not being supported by our environment when we're feeling bad. But it still has to do with our own feelings. So the feeling is that if we feel separated from God, or if God has forsaken us, that just means that we're in a state of bad feelings. And that's the knowledge that we need to have. The knowledge is that we talked ourselves into paradise, and now we've talked ourselves back out of it because we don't like something. And that many of us then go back to the position of, well, I don't know enough. And the answer again is, we don't need to know very much. That we, in fact, can look at this word faith in the sense of that we do know that we can get ourselves into a good state because we've done it before. And in that regard, that's not faith. That is, in fact, confidence based upon prior experiences over and over again, repetitive experience. So let's go, though, to the faith that we have, in the sense that faith then can be feeling secure even though we don't know all of the facts. But this is where ignorance, in fact, comes in Buddhism. You guys have probably heard about the 10 fetters, and there's 5 lower fetters and 5 higher fetters. Well, guess which fetter is at the very top of the list, or the bottom of the list, in the sense of the final one to go? Well, it's not really the final one to go. It's just happens to be listed that way. But that is ignorance itself. In other words, we have to let go of the fact that we are never going to know everything. You'll never be able to see the God that's in your own imagination. That God, you can't find him. There's so many things that you'll never know. The question is, do you know enough? Do you know enough to be happy? Do you know enough to be safe? If you feel that you are insecure, unsafe, then what is it, just a very little bit, that we need to know in order to feel safe? Well, generally, right here, right now, in the present moment, everyone feels safe. It's kind of funny that depending upon the way that people live, I would say almost everyone spends their life 99.9% of the time not in danger. But occasionally we get in danger, and when we are, we don't know how to handle it. And because of that, we feel that we're in danger all the time, where in fact the reality is that we're not in danger. But we don't have to know everything to know that we're not in danger. I mean, there's a whole lot of what-if-isms out there. Well, what if this could go wrong? Or what if Putin does throw off nuclear weapons? Or what if the moon crashes into the earth? Or what if COVID, Omicron Delta virus number 64 comes up? There's all kinds of what ifs of things that can go wrong. And so
quickly, I wanted to say something about that, what you said, the environment, knowing your environment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can only know so much of your environment, right? Like you could hear the sounds or see the sights, or you have your own mind or your feelings. And so, I mean, you can't like know everything, right? Like that ignorance point, but you could also see and kind of appreciate beyond just kind of the content of what's inside of these senses, like the sounds that are there. You could kind of look at it from take a step back and see that they're present, that like the sound that you're hearing and you're seeing, and you have like a mind, and you can kind of, instead of getting entangled into the content of what's going on, you can just kind of observe it from like a more third person, maybe like a conductor, or even watching the conductor do his thing, right?
Yes, exactly so. That in fact, when we want to know something, we tend to go too deeply into it to be able to see it correctly. That in fact, this is something that's quite interesting. And that is that we say, oh, the closer we get in, the better we can see it. Others are saying, oh, the further back that we get, we can see it. The answer to that is no, for both ones. That in fact, in order to be able to see it, we have to do both the close and the back, and then the close again, and then the back, and then the close again, and then the back. And now there's nothing much to do except looking at it closely and then looking at it from the distance. And what we're looking at is, if you want to use the language, we're looking at the nature of God, up close and personal, and then from a distance. But the reality is that it's real that we're looking at rather than imagination. And so the whole point about ignorance is that the number of things that are actually real are small. As vast as this actual universe is, there's only a few things in it. I mean, we've got it down to there's only like what, 92 or something under 100 elements. Not much to it. And yet, of the vastness. So when we understand that things are actually built upon simple principles, that means that we don't have to know all the complexities of the interrelationship between all of those things. All we need to know is enough to feel safe and secure and confident and happy and satisfied and content and grateful and worshipful. That we appreciate. That's what worship really is all about. Now, we often think of worship in the sense of one up, one down, rather than the sense of that this is your environment and that you're fitting in to your environment, that you're part of it, that you're at one with your environment. This is what we're looking for, and we don't need to know all of the complexities. And yet I see a lot of Buddhists, wow, we call them scholars. They get PhDs from Harvard. They read all the books. They write all the books. And they know all the details of Buddhism. Many of them know the language of Pali very, very well. They just don't understand the teachings of the Buddha, because the teachings of the Buddha is very, very simple, not complicated. And yet, why do we become scholars? I think it's because that's what we train students in school. Oh, we give them a gold star if he did the reading of the whole book or whatever like that. So we train our students to want to be scholars, to know everything. Where in fact, we don't need to know everything. We just need to know the right stuff, just a little. Little dab will do you. Robert, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, every so often in one of the major monotheistic religions or even Hinduism, these mystics come along and they talk about loving reality, being in love with divinity, divine creation, this kind of thing. And these traditions usually don't last very long, but they produce some really beautiful stuff, like Rumi, the Sufi
I was just thinking of him. Yes.
Yeah, beautiful poetry about just loving all that is, very wholesome stuff. And Sufism isn't that big of a deal today, unfortunately. I pulled up Rumi's poem, The Guest House. Maybe I can share that. That could be a fun thing to discuss if you'd like.
Okay, yeah, if you've got it at hand, go ahead and read it.
All right, The Guest House. This being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes because each has been sent as a guide from beyond.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. That's exactly correct. So that teaching of Rumi in his language is exactly the same teaching that we're talking about here of becoming friends with yourself. Hello, darkness, my old friend.
A guide from beyond.
A guide from beyond, which means we don't know where it comes from. Beyond what? The Christians will jump on that and wrestle it to the ground, paint it red, hold it up, and say, "See, we've got God," and we don't know. We don't know what's beyond death. We don't know what is out there, and it's okay for us to not know. But it's also quite dangerous for people to think that they know when, in fact, if you question them deeply, they would have to come around to recognizing that they don't know. But in our culture, especially, we're supposed to know. If we don't know, we're supposed to guess. That's what the university tests that have multiple choice. Have a multiple choice test is all because we're supposed to know all of the answers rather than having fun learning. And so you often wind up with a whole lot of knowledge that really is at best just junk. It's unuseful, doesn't mean anything. And yet we still wind up not being able to use that information to come back and to feel good. I mean, how many Christians hear the word? Go ahead, Robert.
Oh, Kishan, can you please mute yourself? There's a lot of noise there. Thank you.
I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, there was a lot of noise on Kishan's mic. I think he was playing with his mic, and it was very distracting. So.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So with this, we can understand now that Christian language that is poo-pooed by the atheist, because the atheists are correct in poo-pooing the stories, the magical stories. But they throw out the baby with the bathwater in the sense that the atheists then are left with that if Christianity is not the answer, then there is no answer, and we wind up being not capable of worship. We're not capable of having a worshipful attitude. We're not capable of gratitude to that which is beyond and all of this, because the magic story was what they had trouble with. But with Buddhism, we can come back and sort of clean out the story and recognize that what we're really talking about here within the basis of all religions is how to come out of our momentary day-by-day suffering and come back into the glory of being alive, or the glory of God. That God does not have to have a personality, nor does God have to have a sex or a gender or even a place. That wherever we are, there we are. So you don't have a particular place. either. You move around from place to place. You're not always the same place. If you're not in the same place, then how can you be the same person? So in this regard, we can see that God is also dynamic. It's alive. And for that reason, it's hard to pin down or get the facts. And that's actually then more of our ability to find the glory in God, or to find the marvelous, that experience of being delighted with the Dhamma. That's actually an important phrase. Delighted with the Dhamma would be the Christian's same version of basking in the glory of God, or being at one. Okay, being delighted with the way things are. So this is actually where Christianity could go to, but they get wrapped up with, where do the rules come from? And in fact, Ian and I just had a long conversation about this, because he's doing graduate work in philosophy, and so he's got all these philosophy papers to write, and the philosophers are really on to that issue about morality. Where does morality come from? The real answer to that is that morality comes from the human mind, just like mathematics and language and everything else. That we invented that. And we do so in the sense that there are some behaviors that, if those behaviors are done to us, we don't like it. Or if that thing happens to us, we don't like it. And then we have a vast group of people who all feel more or less the same way, that they don't like it to be threatened, to be killed. Nobody kind of likes that. And so we wind up having rules like thou shalt not kill. And yet that rule, thou shalt not kill, doesn't stop killing. A lot of people think that it's a really good idea to kill. I imagine there's people who are listening to this video, either now or when it's on YouTube, that would really like to see Vladimir Putin dead. I mean, deep down in your heart, wouldn't you like to just see him just go away? Right. That's the whole point, is that we do have these feelings of not liking something. And so we want to mollify the rules so that, well, yeah, it's okay to kill sometimes. I mean, look at all the places that it's okay to kill sometimes. Armies, self-defense, police, prison guards. All of these professions, you see, give people permission to kill. And yet kill is probably the very biggest of our human rules, with the biggest punishment. Yes,
I
go
thought
ahead.
of I thought of a funny one. Walmart's Black Friday deals.
What about Black Friday? You think that some people don't survive those, huh?
Yeah, no, that happens. That's been in the news. People get killed in stampedes for TV discounts. They'll have a flat screen, at a discount for like $1,000 discount, and someone will die in a stampede. That's happened multiple times,
Mm-hmm.
or multiple people will die even. Yeah. So I
Right.
guess that's a valid reason for some people.
That's a very, very good point. That we make these rules, and then we say, oh, but these are rules not because I think it's a good idea. That's not good enough to make everybody follow my rules. I've got to make it a really big, grand rule coming from beyond, or whatever. And so God makes the rules, is their point. Um, the thing that's quite interesting about that is that if we could accept that I don't like this and I don't like that, then I can deal with it. But if we say instead that it is wrong, now we have, let us say, justification to go and harm people for doing what we don't like. An issue of that would be like abortion. You know, the Republicans and the Christians are doing what they can to stop abortion. But the question that was asked on MSNBC is, what happens when all of the Republican women who are for the Republicans preventing abortion, what happens when their daughters get pregnant and they want an abortion? What are they going to do? Are they going to go get a secret illegal abortion and still keep the laws the way that they are becoming? The answer to that is yes. That's probably how they will do it. That getting these laws repealed will be very, very difficult simply because of the hypocrisy, because this is God's law somehow. Except God never made any laws. There's nothing in the Bible at all about abortion. That in fact, yes, there is in Deuteronomy, and I think in some place in Leviticus it's mentioned, but in Deuteronomy there's actually a story about the concoction itself and the ritual that's done in order to cause an abortion. Isn't that interesting? There's actually an abortion in the Bible, and that abortion is performed by the priest. And the reason for it is that because in those days, as well as now, guys get the idea that my wife is pregnant and it's not my kid. And so this is where they go. They say, okay, well, that's not my kid. Therefore, it should be aborted. And so they take grain. I think that there's actually like a bushel of grain that they have to take to the priest as a gift. And the priest will then sweep the floor and burn one of his old books, come up with some ash, mix that together, and have the pregnant woman drink it while he's doing all of his prayers and chants and all of that kind of stuff. I mean, Levites really can get into chanting, cantors and whatnot. So as they're doing that, if the woman was in fact pregnant from someone else's baby, then magically she's going to have an abortion. And if she doesn't have an abortion, that means that she was okay and that her baby is in fact the son of the jealous husband. If you think about it, that's actually it's quite psychological. You would not want to give an actual potion that actually does cause abortion. You wouldn't want to do that. What you would want to do is convince the guy that because the abortion didn't happen, that it's his kid, so that he lays off, he gets out of it. So, in that regard, I don't understand even why the Christians are so directly against abortion, other than it sounds like, you know, right to life. Oh, we shouldn't be going around killing babies, right? Well, we're not. Abortions are not killing babies. It's killing, and it's not even killing fetus. It's actually removing something from the woman that she doesn't want in her body. Does that mean that the new laws are saying, oh, well, women cannot have breast cancer removed? They can't have a brain tumor removed because that brain tumor itself is probably a living soul, a living being. So we've kind of gotten off of the topic about it in the sense of making rules for other people, rather than recognizing that the rules that should be made very, very simply and very directly, like down to just one rule: dukkha, dukkha nirodha. If this is causing you suffering, then stop doing it. That should be our only rule. And that rule is very difficult then to apply to other people, to go make them follow my rules. So this is what a lot of Christianity is wound up being is just the hypocritical point of, I'm going to make you follow the rules that I and my family don't even bother to follow ourselves. But that's an issue of control. But we've got better things to do with a religion than controlling other people. And yet that's what religion has been doing for centuries. It's used as a control mechanism. An example of that is the divine right of the kings. In other words, the king can be the king so long as he's got, number one, the power to remain king, and number two, the authority from the church, that God said that it was okay for him to be king, or God made the rules, right? So God doesn't make rules. What God does is provide an environment for us to be happy. Robert.
So one thing I've noticed is that wherever power and money is where sociopaths tend to flock. So in the U.S., you have Washington, D.C., Silicon Valley, and Wall Street, full of sociopathic behavior. And I imagine the same happened with religion. There may have been a really nice core there. Like I think Silicon Valley, for example, had a pretty noble core to it in some respects. People just inventing things out of sheer curiosity and kind of the pleasure of creating new technology, right? And then it got corrupted, and perhaps, religion, underwent, a similar trajectory, and it seems that once something reaches a certain point, it just easily gets, the sociopaths flock in and then it gets corrupted, and the original sweetness is gone, and you're left with the stew of shit.
Well, let us, instead of using terms like sociopath, which actually are not inaccurate at all, it would perhaps be a better way of saying that it is when greed comes in. Because some people have really done a lot of damage with their greed without being technically a sociopath. But you are right. Those who do have greedy tendencies. The greedier they are, the more likely they will be listed as a sociopath. And what does that mean is that a sociopath is actually dissatisfied with everything, and he'll use anybody and anything to make things happy and satisfactory for himself, no matter what else other people have. And so it winds up being a very personally selfish position. And while have we had a long history of them? In fact, the one that is my favorite is Alexander the Sixth, the Pope of Rome, from 1460 until about 1503 or something like that. He was, in fact, the Pope that Martin Luther rebelled from. That was the Pope that had the indulgences. That was the Pope that had several illegitimate children. His last name, by the way, the real name was Borgia, and he had a daughter named Lucrezia Borgia. Have you ever heard of her name, Lucrezia Borgia? She was the one who had the ring that opened up that had poison in it, so that she could surreptitiously, while somebody was drinking a good glass of wine, poison it just by, let us say, sexually touching them and giving them attention and whatnot while she was poisoning them. And she poisoned 3 popes in a row until the next time that they elected a pope. Nobody wanted to run for pope because they would wind up dead very quickly. The only one that would run was her daddy. That's how he got to be pope. Okay, so that's a very, very clear example of people going to extraordinary lengths to gain power. Because why do people want so much power? Because if you have power, then you can be less afraid. But if you are not afraid at all, then you don't need any power. So you're right with that one, Robert, that sociopaths and those seeking greed wind up wanting to be in control, and then they and their minions will then make rules for other people. That's in fact the way that you learn that you can take control over other people, is by giving them rules to follow. And
So
if you give people rules to follow, then you can't control them. So this is going back then to the issue of Christianity, is that Christianity winds up a religion that winds up trying to control a lot of people, as opposed to a religion that has individual freedom for each individual person. That's the danger with organized religion, is that the organizers organize it so that they can control things. So the other Robert has his hand up. Robert, did you have a question? No? Okay. All right. Corey, I don't see you there, but I think that this would be a good time for us to move from your first question, because I think that we covered that one fairly well, into your second question.
Oh, would you mind if I did one small follow-up to the
Okay, go ahead.
sociopathy? Sure. So do you think that sociopathy could be cured by the Dhamma, or do you think it's just such an ingrained brain malfunction that there's no way the Dhamma could cure it? And the same extends to psychopathy.
Actually, the psychologists have the answer to that one. The psychologists will often say that sociopaths and psychopaths and narcissists are their most difficult clients to deal with. And almost always those clients become clients because of a court order or some sort of outside pressure. Just like the people who are sent to AA by the court wind up being not good AA people. So that's the problem with the sociopath, is that no, they're more than likely not going to go looking for the Dhamma, because they've already got the position that their problems are to be blamed on someone else. I mean, can you imagine Donald Trump actually taking responsibility for any of the stuff that's happened? Oh no, he's going to find someone else to blame for everything. And that's the issue, is that in order to have some Dhamma come into our lives, we've got to make the room for it by recognizing that we can and sometimes need to change. And sociopaths, they don't need to change, they need to take control. Any changing done is going to be changed by somebody else. You got to get those folks in line so that they can do what I tell them to do. And those are the kind of people who then just naturally gravitate to the top. You've probably heard somewhere that cream rises to the top. Right? Guess what? So do turds. And in our society, it's the turds who rise to the top. That's your politicians, that's your CEOs. And another way of looking at it is that anybody who gets that much power is bound to misuse it in a selfish way. So the outcome could be, and that happened a lot with Silicon Valley, that a lot of the guys in Silicon Valley were not intending to get rich. They were intending to get a product or get something going that they liked. And after they got it going, other people wanted it, and then they became rich. And after they become rich, now the greed will come up. So that you've heard that power corrupts, and absolute power absolutely corrupts. In that regard, let's then recognize that if power corrupts, I don't need any power. I'm quite happy being powerless. If I can be both powerless and safe. The problem is that if I have no power, that means that I'm going to be unsafe. But if I can be safe and bask in the glory of God, I don't need any power. Don't need to recruit or to force other people to do anything, because I'm already satisfied and happy. So that's what happens with religions. Religions get taken over by the wrong people every time. I've seen that within Buddhism, that in fact, Dan Ingram and I on a call with uh, Steve James on the Guru Viking, Dan mentioned that that's what happened with the Mahasi method, that someone got in there with the power to take over, and then his personality became more of the method than what his teachings, what his teachers taught him. And so that happens in many, many different places. This is when anything turns hardcore, is because the guys who eventually, no matter how beautiful or softcore the whole show is, when someone who has got hardcore takes over, the whole show becomes hardcore. That happened to the
Does the one
Catholic
who
Church.
created the religion, should the one who created the religion become hardcore in order to like start it, and that would that stop the issue? Or is it possible for a religion to not become corrupted eventually? Or is that like the destiny of all religions?
Well, let's take the first one as an example first. The first example would be Muhammad. When he was in Mecca, he had all the right stuff for a beautiful religion, which is now the second part of the Quran, because they reversed it. So that the first part of the Quran is about the time that he was in Medina, and the second part of the Quran was actually his early days when he was in Mecca. And all the beautiful stuff that is in Islam came from that. But he got into a lot of trouble, in fact, with his own family. And so he secretly started getting all of his followers, about 200, to sneak out of town. And he was one of the last ones to sneak out of town, and they almost got him. I think they missed him by minutes. And he got out of town. And he went to Medina, and there, with the followers that he had, because Mecca was probably a fairly big place, and Medina was much smaller, with him having 200 followers there, it was fairly easy for him to take over, especially since they already had their own wars and strife and whatnot like that. So he just came in and became a warlord. So the second half of the Quran is the destruction of the beautiful religion that Muhammad started, so that by the time he died, he was a murderer. He either ordered or had taken participation in the execution of about 600 Jews, which were the Jewish group in Medina. And the reason that he killed them all was because they were surreptitiously behind his back dealing with Mecca. And he didn't like that. And he felt betrayed. So there's that issue of the power. So that's an example of a religion going bad in the lifetime of the guy who started it. And then you have the issue of Jesus, that his religion went bad right after he died. How did it go bad? With Paul. And then later with Constantine. Where Buddhism stayed fairly pure up until for several hundred years, or let us say 150 years, up until the time of Ashoka. And that's when it started to go bad. But by the time of the 5th century, it really did get kind of opposite of what the original teachings of the Buddha were. So the Buddhism has also become polluted. But unlike Christianity and unlike Islam, there is a great core of the actual teachings of the Buddha left, to where that core within Christianity is very tiny, very remote. let us say, just as an example, less than 0.1% of any Christians ever get anything out of Christianity. Everybody else just gets more socialization. Very few Christians can actually go into a worship service and go into a state of worship. But that's what we practice, is going into that state of everything is okay, everything is beautiful, everything is marvelous. Wow, God did a good job on that breath. And start getting that attitude of worship. This is what we can do because we have a slightly different language that's not so magical. So, shall we finish with this one, or does anybody have any last remarks? Both Roberts had their hands up again. No?
I
Okay.
was hoping we could talk about the love thing. I don't think we got to the love part.
No, we haven't. I've been saving that tidbit to last. Okay. And I can handle that very easily by quoting Tina Turner, which I've already done. And that is, you ask about love, the answer to that is, what's love got to do with it? Now, what do we mean by love? Because, in fact, I don't know of a word in English language that has more variety of definitions than the word love. One of my favorites is the catty expression of two debutantes, all dressed up to the nines at a party, to where another debutante on the other side of the room is also dressed up to the nines. And one of these said to the other, "Don't you just love her dress?" Said in a really catty kind of way. All right. So when we're talking about love in that regard, what we're meaning is that I love it means that I like it, or it's high quality, or in this regard, isn't she showing off with that dress? Things like this. It has many, many definitions to it. But basically, we can talk about it that we can put the word love in the category of another word, and then we can understand it better, and that is need. If I like something, that's okay. But if I need it, that's more. And if I love it, that's even worse. So you could think of that love, in fact, unless we're very careful with it, is nothing much more than clinging itself. If there's four modes of clinging, and love can be considered a form of clinging. And what are the four modes of clinging? Well, one of the modes of clinging is we cling to ourself. The sociopath loves himself. Then we have procreation. So we love that girl. And that's nothing but just chemicals and hormones. But one of the ways that I like to think about that, the romantic love that we feel, or the beautiful girl that we feel, is simply because we were programmed that way through our genes. That if we weren't programmed that way through our genes, then, I mean, think about it like this, as an intellectual exercise. Having sex or procreation is repulsive. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's a terrible act. Nobody likes to see two dogs fucking. It's an ugly, ridiculous sight. How can we possibly want to do such an ugly, ridiculous thing as having sex unless we think somehow, or we feel somehow, that it is marvelous, that it is God's greatest gift to humanity, is sex? We actually put the feelings of orgasm and the feelings of sex at the top of the list of how good can you feel. That in fact, even meditation is compared somehow that it's better than sex. I've even heard Ferraris and other automobiles, BMWs, and I've even seen R69S BMW motorcycles. They're better than sex. You can't get sex going 120 miles an hour like you can that BMW. And so, in a way, what we're saying then is that sex itself is overrated in our culture because it has that desire or that spark or that underlying quality that's built into our genes, but that there is no reason why that should be exploited and flower full blown into lust. That I had a conversation with Achan Po about this, and one of the things I remember him saying is that he became a monk as a child, and he had no opportunities, none, no opportunities to look up girls' dresses, no opportunities to see videos, no opportunities for porn, no opportunities to chat a girl up, nothing. He never had any opportunities for that. And he was just fine with that. But he was also recommending or recognizing that here I am, a 35-year-old Western man who has been there and done that. And because of that, there's a different mentality that we think now that we've been there, done that, or that we've been raised in this culture where sexuality is such a big deal, that we feel deprived when we don't get any of it. That we feel bad. Oh, I can't get no satisfaction, or I can't get laid. Sitting by the phone, waiting for it to ring. All of those are the kind of things that go on. And we can also say there's words that we use like lovesick, because we want something so bad that we can't get it. Now, I never got lovesick over a motorcycle because those were normally attainable, but I have been lovesick over girls, especially when I was in high school, when I didn't know what I was doing. After I got some skills, then I never got lovesick again. I just got all that I wanted. I learned how to do it. But normally the young kids, then we start off with this society trying to teach us that love is everything. Love makes the world go round. All of that kind of stuff. And basically what it is just selling love. It's a promotion. It's part of our culture. And so love itself then at that rate is highly overrated. That we can do much better off without needing something that we don't have, to learn to be satisfied with what we do have. That in fact, going back to Christianity, within Christianity, the whole idea is to change it from what we call romantic love into married love. And often what married love means is that the people, they know each other and they know what sex is all about, and then they don't bother to do it much anymore, because what's the point? That high sexual activity is something that young people do, because it's the young people who were too stupid to recognize that they've been sold a bill of goods by the society. Look at the cosmopolitan magazines and the sexy little outfits the girls wear on television. So all the girls in town have to wear the sexy little outfit because they saw it on TV. Right? And yet you can go in the opposite direction, and that is the really opposite direction is a burqa, a veil. Now you can't see anything, and in that regard, the typical Muslim man is overwhelmed with his lust. That in fact, possibly the best way for us to do it is to go back to natural, go back to the way things used to be, and let's all run around naked so that all the pussy you ever want to see is right there. You just can't touch it unless you have permission. But why do we make pornography such a terrible thing? is because it's not the porn, it's not the viewing, it's the lust that's associated with the porn, rather than making it absolutely ordinary. Because it really is ordinary. And not only is it ordinary, but it's kind of ordinary and low class. There's nothing much to that. And so we normally associate the word love with romantic love, but then we take that word and we put it all over the place, like the love of a car, love of a country, love of a religion, love of, and then basically the thing that we could fall in love with and need to fall in love with is reality, that which we swim in. The fish can fall in love with the water that it swims in. That's the way of looking at it, that we can, in fact, channel those grand feelings of wonder and joy and being in a state of love, so that then that kind of love does make the world go round, rather than the business world. Love makes the business world go round, because if people didn't love that product, they wouldn't buy it. And so we can change that greed from the greed of, or the want of things that we don't have and we have to go work to get it, into the love of that which we do have. And that's the glory of God. Here it is. We've got that. It's beautiful. It's right here in front of us. It's all over the place. I've got God all over my body. Todd, you got your hand up.
I just wanted to say two things related to that. Well, the first one was something that a study that I thought was really interesting, where they had taken people, they took some people who were like newly in love, freshly fireworks and all that, and then people who had been like married for, decades, and they scanned their brains while they showed them a bunch of images, and in those images were nested a picture of, their partner. And what they found was that the people who were like freshly in love, when they saw a picture of their partner, different parts of their brain lit up from the people who had been in relationships for decades. And basically the people who had been in relationships for decades, the parts of their brains lit up were the ones that would light up like when you see an old familiar chair that you really like. And it's a very, it completely changed the quality of that experience. Just in terms of the brain parts involved with it, which I thought was kind of interesting. And then the other thing was, I was just going to say, I'm assuming maybe you're getting there too, but the version, like the definition of love that I always found to be the most, I don't know, useful or beneficial to me, it was I'm not sure where within Buddhism it originated, but you would often hear it, in various contexts. But it's the love is the wish for the other to be without suffering, and so.
Oh, that's a very noble definition of the word love. That sounds very Buddhist. I mean, in the sense that some Buddhist made that up.
Yeah, it's definitely from Buddhism. I'm not sure whether it's exactly where it was originated though, but I've always liked that.
But guess what? Here's something that may point that to be contradictory. If the guy loves the girl and he really loves her and he really wants her, he wants to get her in bed, whether she wants that or not. Okay. But now you're talking from the Buddhist perspective is that if he loves her, then he's not going to try to get her into bed unless that's what she wants.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. And I like the idea that, you can love a dog as much as a parent or a spouse or, like I said, a tree or whatever. I mean, it's the same, like you don't want the people to suffer. And that's like, I think in that way, though, it's kind of hard almost to define it differently from like compassion, or like to draw a distinction between it, because they're kind of the same things, I would think.
It's interesting there about the dog. Many, many times people will love a dog more than they love any human being. There's examples of that, of people leaving a huge amount of money to a dog or a cat, or um, um, that, let us say that the woman had to evacuate because of Putin or something like that, and that she can't stand to be without her dog. And so the dog has to come too, no matter how much difficulty that dog is going to be for other people. That woman wants that dog no matter what. Okay. So we do have that kind of attachment to other things, but that you can see here, that's merely just clinging. That someday or another, I mean, the average lifespan of a dog at best is 20 years. So if you have a dog as a child, before you full adult, that dog's going to be dead. There's nothing that we can do about it. That's just lifespans of dogs. Most dogs don't even live 20 years. That's a real outside position. Most of them die at 10, 12, 13, 14 years. That's the average lifespan of a dog. And many people go through a great deal of grief when they lose that dog, but they kind of knew that as a puppy. That in fact, I've got Pumpui here now is 9 years old, and she's showing her age. And I remember when she was a puppy back in 2013, she was, I mean, she was just a puppy. And I still see that puppy in her, but she's now over the hill. She's old and fat. You can see it in her, the wrinkles of her skin and other things like this. And so I care for her the same way that I cared for her when she's a puppy, but she's going to die. We can handle that. And so this is part of the wisdom of recognizing that it doesn't matter how much you love something, you're going to lose it. And the Buddha talks about it in the sense of grief comes from those who are dear. So anyone that you love, anyone that you really, really love, is going to cause you a great deal of suffering when you lose them, when the wife dies. Hello, Daniel.
How's it going?
Yeah, you came in a little bit late, but that's all right.
Yes.
We're just about to finish up here. We were talking, first off, we were to wrap up with the review. We talked about Christianity and the better parts of Christianity, especially correct prayer and meditation, is actually communing with our world, communing with God, and God is all around us. So being here in the present moment is communion with God. That's what we practice. So Christianity and Buddhism can be seen as the same thing when you understand the language differences.
Yeah, I think we've talked about that before, kind of.
And so also we're talking about now the word love and all of the ramifications that it has, but what love winds up almost always being is not the agape love that is referred to in the Bible, but rather carnal love or romantic love or even married love, where you've just gotten used to something for so long that it's just part of the furniture. But there is another kind of love, and that is that when we're talking about agape love, we can also refer to that as the Buddha's definition of the word friendship. That when we really are friends with someone, then we really do want their best interest. And so if we are now going to become friends with ourselves, that means that we can love ourselves. But that's not the same thing as the narcissistic love, but rather it's the acceptance of everything's okay, everything is fine. And so we can, in fact, use the word love in a proper way so that we can be in love with our environment. We can be in love with the world. We can be in love with reality. We can be grateful and gracious and practice generosity, but that generosity comes out of gratitude to give it back. Wow, I've gotten so much here, I'm overflowing. Let me return some of this. And so this would be the real value of the word love, is to put it at the highest class, when now you could call it noble. Noble friendship, noble love. I mean, those words are almost contradictory, because noble and love don't fit together unless we kind of really take a hammer to that word love. So that would be the right way of looking at it, is that we do have the benefit and well-being for ourselves and for others as part of the acceptance of the reality that we live in. And that reality that we live in can be called God or the Dhamma. Just that's what it is. Does that help answer your question, Corey? Because you got your hand up.
Yeah, I wrote down some notes that I think would help to some thoughts that I felt were good to share. Because the thing that I do realize that that is a mistake that a lot of people make. They mistake the carnal love, or they mistake pleasure for love. And so I was wondering, because there's a lot of talk in scripture, or I often have heard God's love for humans, or God's love for the universe, or God so loved the world. So like, I was trying to think about how would love fit into all these different situations, and how would it also make sense for the incorrect things, right? How could people do love right and wrong? And you kind of tapped on it with the agape and the carnal love, but here are some of the things that I came to understand as we were talking about it. So these are some of the components and things that I think make up agape love. And I just kind of freestyled it. So I don't really know what agape love is. I haven't really read a lot up into it, but I do I do think I'm qualified to speak on it for a second, or at least say my thoughts. So there's about 7, so I'll try and go through each one of them pretty quickly. But one of them is first on the list is the surrender of the ego and the selfishness. So when we think about love between God and human, if we think about love between God and a person, or between a man and a wife, or between friends, what we're trying to say, or what that we think would be a great thing, is we want to see them as equals. So part of love is this ability to be on the same level, right? The ego is knocked down from the top position, that I'm the most important, right? Ego kind of has this problem of being either the foundation or the top. And so that's a benefit, I would say, or a quality of agape, of real love or noble love, is that it is at least able to drop the ego from the top of the pyramid to at least equal with one other person, right?
When you use the word ego, what I would use instead is the word selfishness. That
yeah, like ego, or like
we no longer become selfish.
Yeah. And like in another way to say it is that some of the symptoms, or the way that this like issue might manifest, is that essentially your mind automatically and subconsciously prioritizes yourself as the top. So when all of your thoughts and all of your hopes and dreams, everything that comes out of you, your interactions in every moment, if you have the self at the top, or if you think yourself is better than others or different, it's kind of like it causes issues. You feel more separate, you feel alone. So being able to have yourself not be the most important thing in the world, that is, yeah, like that's the reducing of the ego, right? So where we can not have ourselves be, and another example of that would be a loving parent who has a child. Suddenly they don't think of themselves as the most important. They're willing to sacrifice themselves, their self-importance, and they're willing to do things like work a job that they don't really like, but they need that money to provide support and safety for their family. So this is a quality
There's a song.
of noble.
The song is, "He ain't heavy, he's my brother."
Yeah. Another one is like love is a bond with God. And if we're talking about the present moment, I like to think of one of the qualities of God or something that I have experienced with this feeling of God, or God is omnipresent. And if we are in the present moment, we are having a bond with God. And that's kind of a good way to try and understand this love of God and the love of man, right? Man meets God in the present moment. God is already omnipresent. So there's a little bit in there too, right? So by the way, I would say that if you perfect love, you're going to master all these things. You're going to do them all at once. And you're going to know how these things fit together to have this experience of love. And so with that, the bond with God, right, is sharing of now. So if we think of God, a bond with God is a bond with the present moment across all the different realms, even the mental. Sharing of the now with another person, we might think of like being with them physically or kind of present, or so sharing of the present moment. And then another quality is complete acceptance, forgiveness, and gratitude. And so acceptance is another way of getting into the present moment. We just accept. It's not about knowing, it's not about anything else. You're just complete acceptance. And this is another way to get into the present moment. Forgiveness. Forgiveness is letting go of the past. Yet again, another way to get into the present. Gratitude is a positive way to add a kind of happiness and a love, and it's all those three things together combined for a very special effect. Another one is, I guess this is just gratitude said differently, but we're going to be happy for them, happy to be with them. Another one is love is showing up for it, for being open. I guess that's just acceptance. I just kind of phrase it differently. Love is having their best interest in mind, which I guess kind of the tricky thing about having their best interest in mind is that you need to have your own self-love too. And so that's, again, being on equal footing with other people, specifically with whoever you're in love with. And if we think about the love of Jesus, it's about that effect across all people, across all time, right? So the ultimate love would be to have these effects with all people, to expand your love to include these elements with everybody. And then another one was love is giving, and love is it's not holding back, which I guess again relates to selfishness. So I guess I kind of reiterated some of those things, but those are some of the things that came up to my mind that I thought matched all of the, like when some of those are missing, someone isn't really having the right kind of love. Maybe there's a little bit of carnal pleasure in there. Maybe they are mistaking love for pleasure, or so there is ways to kind of like do love the right way, have perfect love, or and then there's also ways to kind of have lust, contaminate those things. And so all of those things would match to the love of God. So that doesn't even have to be, just like the relationship with the present moment and anything and everything that you find in it. And you can have that kind of love with animals. I think the most interesting thing is that, like, if someone is, they've been wounded by people, they don't like people, and you hear that a lot. People say, I love my dog more than I love people. They are unable to forgive. They are contaminated by this past trauma, and they can't overcome it. And they feel love with their animals the most because no animal has ever really hurt them the way humans have. So that's what I really liked about that little exercise, is all those qualities.
You're not the first one to have that little exercise. And in fact, it sounds to me like that you had forgotten that you had read that out of a paragraph of the Bible. There is a place where all of that stuff is in fact listed. It's in the epistle someplace, I'm not sure where, but it starts off with, love is kind and love is forgiving and love is, the whole list of stuff that you put there is coming right out of the Bible.
I never read the Bible. I just freestyled it. But I do agree that, like, yeah, it's if it is love, it'll be the same for everyone. And so it was a big interest to me. I've been looking into it, and I just feel like I didn't really know what love was or have my heart open to it. And so I put a lot of effort and concentration and just trying
that's
to kind of
because love is,
yeah.
as we've talked before, love is not one thing. Love is all over the place. We use the word for all kinds of things.
Mhm.
And so it's actually because it's become a throwaway word. It's better to use other words. Another example, in fact, I'd already started with that, is the word that you're using called ego. Ego is a throwaway word that, in fact, most of the way that it's used is exactly opposite of the way that Freud used the word, and he was the one who invented and made it popular. The superego, the ego, and the id. And in fact, when we talk about ego and egotistical in our language, what we actually are meaning is id and idtistical. That's that very, very basic, selfish reptilian brain that's designed to keep us alive, and it's based upon fear. And so that's that would be the word. So when you use the word ego, I want to bring it up to, well, no, the ego is in fact possibly the best part about you. That would be your ability to observe, your ability to see straight, your ability to put things together in sequence or connect the dots. But the problem is the id, in the sense of the selfish child, the brat, the barbarian within. And so that's the way that the word ego has become, and the way that you were using it. And so that's why I changed the word from ego into the word selfishness, because selfishness then is, let us say, loving are looking for love in all the wrong places, is what selfishness does, because it's looking for love in selfish places. So we look for love in sex, we look for love in relationships that wind up being an issue of ownership and control over, if I can get that girl to do what I want her to do, then I own her, she's mine. I mean, every one of you have had that kind of mentality of, if I could only get her into bed, then she's mine. I've got her. I own her. Guess what? She goes to bed every night and she doesn't own herself. How can you own her when she doesn't own her?
Mhm.
And so what we can do now is rearrange our language around the word love, so that we can begin to avoid that word, because it means so many different things to so many different people that it's not a useful word to use. Just like whenever I use the word meditation, I almost always define it, because otherwise people will think that I'm talking about something that they know all about. And I would much rather use the word ānāpānasati, because that's the word that people then need to have a new correct definition for in order to understand it. When we use the word meditation, that's just all over the place. The word love is just all over the place. And for that reason, I wouldn't use it. However, the word friendship may not have quite the power of the word love, but it is a much, much cleaner example of what we're talking about doing. And so I would recommend, like Tina Turner, and just, what's love got to do with anything? That's just a throwaway word. Don't you love that dress? Don't you love the weather we're having? We can use words like I like it, or it's good, or whatever like that, without using this word love.
It's funny in Spanish.
Unless we're trying to give a message, okay? And when I'm saying giving a message, the Thai language is tilak. Tilak is the word for love. So if I say tilak or tilak kun, that means I love you. But it doesn't have in Thai language the connotation of all of this other stuff. That tilak in Thai actually does have that quality of friendship. So I tell Tam often, tilak, I really appreciate her. Do I actually love her? I'm not sure. We'd have to go through the list of definitions of the word love to figure out, do I love her or not? But I do very much appreciate her. She makes my life easy. But do I tear her clothes off? Nope. So, let's see who's got their hand up. Robert, you've got your hand up.
Yeah. So I have a question for Corey. Do you think could we say the present moment is God?
It's like Amarada was saying, is that it's such a throwaway. I wouldn't say throwaway, right? But it basically, I would say it's like a dangerous word, and it's dangerous because it is a throwaway word, and so there's some crossover there. But the other thing I would say is that God is a heavy word. It's very hard to lift. It takes a lot of a certain kind of spiritual strength. So
I
I
know
try
it's
to
only got
not,
3 letters and it's got the weight of a 100-letter word.
yeah. So I would say that unless you really know how the whole system kind of works, try to not use the whole God word. But then in the end, they do mean the same thing, right? And it's kind of, but it's like if you define the present moment and you say God is the present moment, it creates a kind of an issue because we think that we know what the present moment is, but we don't know what God is. And so I'll bring it back to the not sure, right? So not sure is a great way to get into the present moment and to really connect with what is truth, right? We might say that like God is truth, the present moment is truth, and the truth is in the present moment. We have direct experience of it. We say direct knowledge, and that's, I think, a different kind of knowledge. But so if you say not sure, I'm not sure, I'm not sure, I'm not sure, eventually you're going to kind of hit pay dirt, and the pay dirt is what you can't ignore, right? The present moment is a kind of truth that you just can't ignore. It's always there, and so if you do the not sure, you can't get below a certain point of what is truth or what is now, and so there's a kind of a danger there, but that is a kind of a good, God present moment. There's a lot of crossover there, and so be advised. But it does kind of work.
Yeah, to
Thank you.
finish off
That's a
on
really good
that,
answer.
Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, yes. Thank you, Corey. That's good. And it fits in with what Bhikkhu Buddhadasa had said. And he talks about it this way, that he says it like this, like in Buddhism, Dhamma is God. Well, Scott, you've
Hey,
joined us right a little bit
I'm a
late.
little late.
Just
Yeah,
about to finish up, I think. And
yeah, I
so
just came to say hi.
Dhamma is the God. But we can again look at it from the position of how weighty are we going to use that word God. But the God, because of Christianity, the word God is a very, very heavy, heavy, heavy word. But Dhamma is light. It's just that's all there is. There's not much to it. And so that in fact Christianity, and it's not the religion itself, but it's the people who have brought this mentality to Christianity, is everything is big and ponderous and heavy, and God's in heaven and hells and all of that kind of stuff, to where within Buddhism the whole quality is that everything is light, everything is easy. It really is a paradise. That when things are heavy, they're not so much of a paradise anymore. I mean, you can imagine living at a seaside resort, let us say here at Hadrian, to where the bungalows are more like salas, which means there's not much walls, that your valuables you put into the locker in the building, and you just hang out for, let us say, $2, $3, $4 a day, and the beach is marvelous and beautiful. But if a developer comes in and builds a great big hotel and fences the place in and makes it important, like calling it the name like Fontainebleau or something like that. Now, when people go there, yeah, they still enjoy the beach, but it's heavy. It's not like a deserted beach on an island, which is free and light. Now it's a beach resort. Everything is expensive. The meals are very big and ponderous and weighty and heavy, and everything like that is heavy. So that's one of the ways of understanding that when we don't understand something and the value that it has, we often add something to it that doesn't belong there. And what is it that we add? We add importance. We add weight to it. We don't leave it just the way that it is. We make it special. We make it wonderful. We make it marvelous. We bring a construction engineer in and building contractors, and we try to make something out of it because it's all important. But when we recognize, no, the Dhamma actually is just light, bright, and easy. There's not much to it. Let's fall in love with that kind of paradise instead of one that's very important, valuable, super busy. So, Robert, you in the blue shirt, you got your hand up.
Yeah, sure. So, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on, I think so with respect to sex. So there is that very carnal element to it, but there's also like, a lot of vulnerability and intimacy, right? And I think one reason people value it as much as they do is like the fact that they are being completely vulnerable with the other person physically and ideally emotionally, in kind of the perfect, sexual encounter, right? And so,
But we use the word vulnerable when we're in conversations out of the room. When you're in the room, no one uses the word vulnerable. What we use and think about instead is that we are safe with each other,
sure.
not vulnerable. Vulnerable means we're not safe.
Well, actually, what I meant in terms of vulnerable is you are safe because you're
You're
willing
not
to be
vulnerable,
vulnerable.
exactly.
So if you're willing to be vulnerable, you must be safe. And that's the beauty of it, right?
Except that
Is
when you're willing to be vulnerable, you're not being vulnerable. You're being safe instead. Vulnerable, it
right,
actually the
right. And
word
vulnerable
itself
is the
means
concept.
not safe.
Right. And so vulnerable is the concept we use to describe it from outside of the room, as you said earlier. Okay, I get what you're saying, what you're getting at with that. But I think that's kind of another element. And I think also, in relationships, love relationships, there's kind of the idealization aspect, but there's also the deep connection, through all the mysterious ways in which people connect. I think people often connect in very mysterious ways, and you can end up, loving someone that you might not have thought, you would be interested in, or vice versa. And so what are your thoughts on kind of the mysterious ways that people, find themselves attracted to what they, they find themselves connect to what they connect to that they can't even explain? Like
I
I think,
would say
yeah,
the mystery really has to do with the fact that most people are rushing headlong into things and they're not watching what they're doing. They're not watching where they're going. That in fact, really, if you are clear and open and watch and see what you're going on, you can appreciate the mystery all the more. That we will never finish with the mystery, but there's no reason to go into it blindly. And that's what we normally do, that we rush headlong because of our lust and our love and our desire is so strong that we go into it without watching what we're doing. We rush into it. So a better way to do, instead of being trepid or doubtful, is to just merely Be slow. Be mindful. Look at what you're doing. Walk right in there slowly, watching what's going on. See what you're doing, recognizing that there is some value in this. And then we can, let us say, start changing the language just a bit so that we can use the word love in a more wholesome, valuable way. Because the word itself is just all over the place. It's got so many different definitions and meaning. Perhaps it might be even a good idea to stop using that word unless you have a particular use for it. But you can tell your mate many different ways without having to use the word love. That in fact, it might be better if you used other language, like I really appreciate what you did today. Appreciation. That would be a much better word to use, that you enjoy what she's doing. So that's the way that I would look at it, is to find words that we can use that allow us to feel really gushy and warm and safe and secure and satisfied in our relationships. Love is optional. What's love got to do with that? If you feel safe and secure and warm and gushy and friendly.
What's love got to do with?
Yeah, what's love got to do with that?
Yeah, it's funny, in Spanish, they have many different words and tiers of love, and I think it's kind of a better way of talking about it.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's one of the problems with the English language is that there are a few words like the word love that has so many different definitions that we don't even know what the word doesn't mean anything anymore. And so it's much better to go after the kind of words that we are looking for that do point at what we are talking about.
Well, yeah, it's also funny, but there are a lot of words like that. I'm a writer, right? And I often like to try and find a new word if I've used the same word too many times. And there are certain things, like say excited, that it's better to just find a metaphor instead of a new word. I was looking forward to it like I would like, a little kid looking forward to, the presents under the tree on Christmas Eve, right, or something like that. And so, yeah, it is interesting how, there just aren't enough words. I think sometimes.
Oh, you just brought something up important that we should at least add this to it. How many of you ever seen the movie Rocky Horror Picture Show? It's an old movie, and I won't go into any details of it.
Great movie.
Yeah, it's
Excellent movie.
beautiful movie. And in one of the scenes there, I forgot what the guy who was in charge, the one that had the big hairdo, and he, at one of the songs that he was singing, he used the word anticipation. Now, the whole point about Rocky Horror Picture Show is that it has a very strong, heavy gay element to it. Gay bikers and all of this kind of stuff are involved with that. And so this guy has this, I think it's kind of a robot, but he is for a middle-aged elderly gay guy, this guy is drop dead gorgeous. Okay. And so that's the scene, and he's about to take him upstairs. And the word that he's using is anticipation. Anticipation. Okay. You can hear the anticipation in the word anticipation. And so that whole quality of anticipation is the quality that we often operate with this word love. that it's not that I'm getting laid, it's that I'm about to get laid. That's where we get, there's a time when you know that you're about to get laid. Sometimes that point happens at supper. Sometimes it happens as you're going into the bedroom. Sometimes it happens when the panties actually come off. But there's a point in time when you know that you're going to get laid before it happens. And it's almost like the getting laid then is not even important anymore. It's the knowledge that I'm going to get laid. It's that anticipation that I'm going to get laid. That's what we're looking for. It's that rock solid evidence that I'm going to get it.
So anticipation is like a feeling, it's a positive feeling of a present moment that's about to happen. And so it's different than expectation, which is something you don't know is going to happen, but you hope it's going to happen. I think. I'm pretty sure that's how it kind of works and feels. What do you think?
Right, exactly so. And so in that regard, we can say that let's work with our practice of ānāpānasati, not for the anticipation of being in the presence of God, if we're going to use that language, but it's actually being in the presence of God, or being in that state of being in the here now, or being in that state of in our sensory input. This is what we want to look at, not that anticipation. So often love and sex and all of that has anticipation built into it, as opposed to the actual results of getting it. And so that's another way of looking at it, that love has more to do with anticipation rather than the actual pleasure of, it's known very well in the movies, and that is after the deed is done, he's smoking a cigarette. That's that cigarette afterwards, that's the indication of the satisfaction of the release. It's done now. I'm in it, or I've got it. So this is where we're looking for with that our practice of ānāpānasati is not the anticipation of being in the present moment. It's the result of having been in the present moment, and we're in the present moment, continuing in the present moment. That's the real satisfaction of this is it. We're in it now, not we're about to have it. But often the big jump in our feelings, the exuberance, the excitement is all through about the anticipation about getting it, as opposed to the actual getting it. And so that's just one of the qualities of love, is the anticipation, as opposed to the actual, it's all over now, we've got it. I also use the example of, imagine that you're out in the desert and you're really, really thirsty and you've got no water, and you cross one sand dune after another. And as you cross or climb to the top of this sand dune, lo and behold, down below is an actual oasis with real palm trees, real water, real tents, real camels, real girls in hoochie coochie or belly dancing costumes, the whole 9 yards. It's a real oasis. And so down you trot, you're running down that sand dune to get down to that oasis. That's the anticipation. You know you're going to get the water. And then you fall on your face and you start drinking. And after you've drunk a few while, you roll over on your back. Having finished the water, now you're satisfied. While you're running down that hill, you're in a state of anticipation. You haven't gotten the water yet, but you know you're going to get it. As opposed to after you've drank the water, now you're completely satisfied. And so this is what we're looking for, is that state of feeling satisfied, not the feeling of anticipation that we're about to be satisfied. One has excitement, the other one has complete relaxation, complete satisfaction in it.
Right. The thing I want to throw in there real quick is, and the anticipation comes and goes. The gratitude comes and goes, but the satisfaction is like the resting. So I've been experiencing kind of like satisfaction in the present moment, and I'm walking around, and I didn't understand this feeling, but it's anticipation. It's like if I'm walking and I'm present, I'm just satisfied, and but sometimes I'll need to move, and I will kind of feel an anticipation, and I was mistaking it for a desire, but it's like anticipation is this feeling of the present moment, and so I would be satisfied for the main thing. That's the main home base, and I'll anticipate what's going to come next or what I need, usually a drink of water or maybe something to eat, and then I'll feel gratitude, and then so the anticipation and the gratitude come and go, but they are part of this cycle of anticipation, satisfaction, gratitude. But to stay in satisfaction is very important, because if we get lost in the anticipation or the gratitude too much, well, I don't know about gratitude, but basically somehow craving and clinging can kind of come into those things, specifically if we crave that which we anticipated.
That's exactly right. We haven't gotten our satisfaction. We haven't actually gotten it yet. There's that anticipation. I'm going to get it. And so it's good for us to recognize the distinction between those two, because one's got that anticipation about to happen, and the other one is the recognition, this is it. We finished, or we got it, or this is good enough. So, Corey, this has been a couple of good questions that you've had about Christianity and love, because Christianity really uses that word a lot. And it's got so many different meanings to it. So if we go back to the words that we know how to use and expand their meaning, we can bring that word friendship in to bring all the highest quality that we have with the word love without having all of the negative stuff that the word love has in it. So, does anybody have any parting words before we finish it? Scott, you've got something, yes.
I love you guys.
Excellent.
Thanks,
We have
everyone.
There's been a few of us that have been in the Discord daily or so, almost daily, just chatting and hanging out in the video chat. So anyone here or anyone watching the video, they're welcome to join. The Discord will be in the video description, and I can link it here again.
Yes, thank you.
Robert, Todd, Scott, they've all been there. Yeah.
Parker, we really appreciate the work that you're doing. Thank you so much. I appreciate
I've got a question for Parker. Parker, I think this is the first time I've seen you wear a shirt. What's the reason? If any.
I mean, the air conditioning's on, it's more comfortable.
Okay, there you go. Good enough.
That was the occasion.
Okay, Robertson, Scott, and Daniel, and Parker, thank you so much, Todd. Appreciate you guys. Corey is just gone, so we'll see you guys later. Thank you so much. This has been a really great talk.
It's been wonderful. Thank you.
All right. Have a great night, guys.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.